am here. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you fine. Welcome aboard.
Great. Thank you. I'm excited.
Yeah, this is going to be fun. John Rothman is hopefully going to come on. He is going to come on with our usual ad hoc way of getting, which means that he's going to be on my phone, and he's going to be talking through the speakerphone on my laptop through my channel. So,
Okay.
how are you doing?
Doing great. We had a family. My best friend and my godson graduated from college yesterday. So there was a big group of us together celebrating that. And it was just so well done and so fun. And the weather was perfect. So all kinds of good stuff this weekend so far. And now Father's Day. And, the kids are busy making brunch right now. So we'll see how that goes.
Nice. There you go.
Yeah. So all good. How about you? How's your weekend going?
Well, I've been mostly planted in front of the computer and the TV looking at everything that's been happening outside of Father's Day celebrations, which is interesting. I do think that we have sort of turned a corner on what's happening in this country, simply based on what's happened with, if you look at who showed up at which protests and which parade, which I'm personally rather comforted by, but we'll see what happens.
Well, so what do you mean by that? Because I'm a little bit embarrassed to say, but also very happy to say, because I've been so focused on the graduation and getting all the family together and all that good stuff. I have been sort of blissfully distanced from this. So what about it was comforting? That's great to hear.
Well, I think the No Kings protests were well organized. In general, you had tens to hundreds of thousands of people showing up in different cities, as diverse as San Francisco and Boise, Idaho, and Salt Lake City, and they're peaceful. And you saw lots of American flags. And my understanding is that one place that No Kings was not concentrating on organizing protests for was Washington, D.C., where the Army Day parade was happening. Basically because they wanted to send out their messages as articulate as possible without confrontation and without, frankly, the infection of radicalism that we've seen because of the urgency and exigence of what's been happening in Los Angeles. If you look at the Army Day parade, which in my opinion, got taken over as a personal venture by the president, that seems to have failed. If you looked at how many people were showing up, you couldn't even say. I don't think you could even say that even in the tens of thousands, people showed up at the mall on the mall to watch the parade. A lot of them couldn't see the parade even when it does, and they had to start the parade early because it rained. So there you go. I think it's very interesting to see what's happened. I think we've seen an interesting ascendancy in. It seems like Gavin Newsom has finally grown up, which is interesting. Yeah.
I'm going to have to catch up on everything.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting. I was just looking at James Fallows's Substack, his comments on Gavin Newsom and how he appears to be. First off, he's very much the Bill Clinton of this day and age, I think. And this is one of the things that caused a lot of people like me to lose patience with him, because he triangulates all over the place. But also, he's very good in terms of communication, very well suited for this age, which is really driven by breaking news and, making his speeches seem very much like fireside. It's like every one of his speeches is more like a fireside chat than an actual speech. And he's finally been able to take those talents and, sort of meet the immediate issues, which I think is interesting.
Oh,
and kind of a relief.
Yeah.
Because I've also been kind of stuck in this. Are you familiar with the Party for Socialism and Liberation?
No.
It's probably okay. Okay. This group has been around for years in one form or another, and it's got strong Bay Area roots. And one of the things that sort of came out in one of the op-eds that we published last week is that there's memberships in this organization inside the board of the United Educators of San Francisco. And they're also very much on the margins of the current protests, trying to, well, if you don't like this deportation, then you have to hate Israel too, and you have to start setting things on fire, and that's their usual MO. And so now Josh Hawley in the Senate, and I think either Luna or Green in Congress on the Oversight Committee have been starting to look into the fact that PSL has not only been all over the place with regards to the protests, but they get a lot of money from foreign sources. And so that just happened on Friday, and I've been trying to follow this from a couple days before and see if we could just put together a piece basically saying, oh, you know what, UASF is infected by PSL. No wonder they're a bunch of clowns. And now it turns out this is going to have a bigger dimension. So,
wow,
that's one of the stories I'm thinking about for this week. And also, Police Commission is probably good. Rules Committee is looking at filling that last seat on the Police Commission tomorrow, and
yes.
the upzoning is also happening. Upzoning hearing is also happening at land use tomorrow. So Monday's going to be busy, and the rest of the week is probably going to be pretty busy, simply because we're in the middle of the budget process, which we are here to talk about. Is 11 o'clock.
Yes.
Welcome to the Sunday Bunch space at the Voice of San Francisco. I am Editor-in-Chief Mike Egge. I am here with Marie Hurabiell, who is the Executive Director of ConnectedSF, and who has a sterling resume of her own, including being on the Presidio Trust Board of Directors and heading the Presidio Trust Board of Directors, if I remember correctly, as well. Longtime attorney and Republican activist. And what else have you done?
Well, I've had a career in tech. Yes, I've had a career as an attorney. And a few years ago, when Chesa Boudin was elected, I was prompted to start paying attention to what was going on in local politics. And I ended up, I originally took a leave of absence from my job and then permanently left my tech career to focus on fixing our city, because, as I think we are all aware now, it had really gone awry. And so we're working hard to bring it back. And so that's what I've been doing for the last few years. And that's why I have opinions on a lot of things going on in San Francisco right now.
Excellent. And one of the things that you've been working on with ConnectedSF is looking at the budget. You did a whole series of articles that we published on The Voice talking about what you think should be done with the budget, and using some data to back that up. And you have to pardon me, I'm slowing down because I can't do 5 things at once, and John wants my phone number.
Oh. Well, while you do that, I will say thank you for having me on this morning. I'm really excited to talk about the budget, and really appreciate the work that you have been doing, The Voice has been doing, and you and Susan in particular on just raising awareness of everything that's going on in San Francisco and really trying to attack our problems head on. And I appreciate that you posted our or the series that I had done in collaboration with some other ConnectedSF colleagues. And I thought it was helpful to get it out there, hopefully helpful to get people just more aware of what is happening in city government. We really have to be mindful after seeing what happened over the last decade.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's just the budget right now, I think, is still at the $16 billion level, which always, I think, surprises people. People immediately ask, why is a city budget that big? and how does it get there, etc. Susan, are you on board? I was trying to log you on as a co-host. Okay, we're not hearing from her. So
I see her there, but she's muted.
Oh, okay. She should unmute herself then.
Hi.
There you are.
I was sending out the post for people to join us.
Excellent. And hopefully John Rothman will be coming on soon also to chime in on the budget. So,
hi, Susan.
Hey, Marie.
Good morning.
I'm just putting out a call to come listen to us talk about San Francisco's big, ugly budget.
There you go.
It is a big, ugly budget. That is for sure.
And everyone wants their piece.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, how you doing? Good. Thank you so much. Okay, let me see if I can get you on here via our usual ad hoc method of group communication. John, let's see. Can everyone else hear John?
Yeah,
I can't.
Not
very
much.
Well.
Yeah, not well.
If I speak a little more clearly?
I think volume would help as well.
Right, you know what I'm going to do? Let me shift to another phone, and let's see if it works. Such excitement.
Happy Father's Day, John.
Thank you. I'm going out in an hour to MC the Father's Day concert in Golden Gate Park. And
nice.
How fun.
So here, let me try on this phone. See if it sounds better.
Are your kids with you today, John?
What?
Are your children with you today?
Yes. Joel surprised me, and Samuel is already here. So we're going to go out to the park. Is this a little better? Can you hear me?
Yes.
There you go.
Okay. And everything's fine. I'm so glad to have them here. They're at the farmer's market on Clement Street. I had to beg off so I could do this with you.
Are you going to dinner later?
We did last night. I took the boys, Ellen, and my niece and nephew, and took them all for dinner at Presidio Kebab. Everybody had a wonderful time. And
nice.
Tonight, so. But you know what? It's just great the boys are here.
Oh, yeah.
That's what's nice.
Well, excellent.
I'm reminded my wife every day is Mother's Day.
Yes.
There you go. So, Susan, what do you think, actually, both Susan and Marie, I think, what do you think we really need to watch out for in terms of the budget and the process that's going on now?
Well, since Marie wrote the definitive 13-part series on the budget, I will defer to her to give us her top picks of what to watch for.
Well, I think what we've already started to see is everybody and their brother is showing up, and their sister and mother is showing up and demanding, quote, their fair share. And they're this is what I call, puppies and kittens politics. And we see it all the time in San Francisco.
That's right up my alley. Cat. Get it? John will like that.
Exactly. I love it. Our leaders squander money on things that we don't necessarily want. We would not have chosen to pay for ourselves. The examples are rampant, but even getting into things like, renaming schools instead of opening schools, or providing endless supply of needles instead of a needle exchange, things like that. Like, they have made choices that is going back a decade or so that the public wouldn't necessarily agree with, but they took our money, they used it that way. And then what they do is they come back to us saying, well, now we need money for schools, and you're evil if you don't give money to schools. Now we need money, for legal aid. You're evil if you don't give money to legal aid. It is very easy to tug on the heartstrings if people aren't really paying attention and recognizing, you know what, we already paid for that, or we should have already paid for that. Public safety, the cop tax that they tried to get through last March, that bill, the way it was changed by Asha Safai in committee, would have made it such that we would have to create a new tax and fund that new tax before we could hire any new cops. So it was originally supposed to be a bill that would help us move forward in hiring new police officers, but the way it was modified or bastardized, as some of us might say, put us in a position where if that had gone through, it would have been years before we could have hired more police officers. And again, it's the that's the basic function of government. Keeping us safe is the basic function of government. That's where our tax dollars should be going first. And so what happens is they bring to us piecemeal, oh, we need to fund this, oh, we need to fund this. No, it needs to be looked at globally. It needs to be viewed holistically. And, we'll get more into this, I'm sure, later, but what we're looking at starting a couple weeks ago and going forward is everybody showing up, demanding their piece. And what they need to recognize is there's a bigger picture here, and San Franciscans are spending way too much as it is. And we need to start cutting, and everyone is going to be unhappy, and that's fine.
And, I always point out as well that, and I know they get, the nonprofits get very angry about this when I say it. But they can go out and fundraise, like those of us who have nonprofits, you and I, Mike, we're all parts of nonprofits. Mm-hmm. And they can go out and fundraise like every other nonprofit. People seem to feel like these groups are entitled to tax dollars. And that's a phenomenon that is really, well, it's not exclusive to San Francisco, but it's much bigger in the entitlement of these nonprofits. You don't see it in other counties, maybe Oakland, but Santa Clara County, for example, you don't see that. You see the government taking care of things and paying for things. There's not a huge nonprofit industry in Santa Clara County in the Silicon Valley. There are groups that are big and they fundraise and then they help these groups, but it isn't the city government that hands out millions and millions to the tune of billions of dollars. The fact that a legal aid group is getting $4 million and they're whining about losing $2 million. And then when, Erica did an interview with the leader of that organization, what's it called? SF Open Legal or Legal Open, right. Whatever. He was, throwing out, oh, well, we have this study that we did, but he couldn't give her any specifics, oh, we've helped, we think 800 people.
But none of that matters, Susan.
No.
He's going on a hunger strike.
Yes, he's on a hunger strike. Correct. Right. And
we must have sympathy for the lawyer who is going on a hunger strike.
Yes, who has 15 people that he might.
I don't know about any urban guerrillas who are going on hunger strikes in prisons or campesinos or poor people who are going on hunger strikes because they're hungry. But this guy's a lawyer and he's going on a hunger strike.
Yeah, I mean, not just that, but, when Erica asked him what would be the consequence, he said, I might have to let go 15 employees. Well, one of their employees making six figures is a cultural director. Like, why why are San Francisco taxpayers paying for a legal aid to have a cultural director? I'm sure he could come up with a reason for it, but I could come up for a reason why I should have, a pit bull director at the Voice of San Francisco, because I'd like to get some money for pit bull rescues. But that's just not how it works.
Right.
Exactly.
And that's exactly the point. And because there's so little oversight of our tax dollars going to these nonprofits, they've really run amok. And not to single out any particular cause or any particular reason, but it is a fundamentally bad idea for our tax dollars to be funding these nonprofits. And it started maybe 2 decades ago, but really, I've only paid attention the last 5 years, to be honest. As I noted at the beginning of the podcast, I was focused on my kids and my career and everything else. And when you suddenly start to pay attention, it's somewhat overwhelming, to be honest. And what has happened, and I had, when I was taking my year leave of absence and really digging in, I had a campaign attorney, take me for a walk and kind of give me the lay of the land. And one of the things he explained to me was there are all these nonprofits. And remember, 5 years ago, it was, our board of directors was basically, Catherine Stephanie was the moderate, and then there were Asha Safai bounced back and forth sometimes, Mandelman bounced back and forth sometimes, but it was really, at least 8 solid progressives, quote unquote progressive, meaning far left, meaning, a lot of it with DSA, Bernie Kratz, that type of group. They've co-opted that name progressive, which is unfortunate, but it's that very far left, the people who really supported Chesa Boudin, et cetera. He explained to me that the way San Francisco was working was that the people in power, these supervisors, were funding nonprofits, which were basically their buddies. And then their buddies, and this is, Coalition on Homelessness, all these groups, their buddies were then lobbying the government and would show up when that supervisor told them to or directed them to. Absolutely. And so essentially what you have here is the I'll just call them progressives for lack of a better word, but the progressives over the last 20 years organized themselves brilliantly and funded themselves brilliantly. I mean, you gotta give credit where credit is due. They did an amazing job of creating a very hard to crack system where they get their people elected and they keep getting funded, and they are doing whatever they want with our money. And for a lot of us, they're actively working against our interests. Sure. Those of us who are just regular citizens, just, trying to have a life in San Francisco and get by. And so that's that is really a huge area that should be addressed. And I know Sanjana Friedman, I think, wrote some things for the Voice of San Francisco. She wrote that big piece on the Dream Keepers Initiative, I think it was. And she went through a bunch of the nonprofits, and their metrics were things like, did we make people happy, or things like that. There were no real metrics, and they weren't really, there were no goals of these nonprofits. So they were just receiving millions of dollars, and there weren't, any goals that they were working towards. And so I think people are really starting to become aware that is a problem. And so what we're looking at, going forward this next month at the Board of Supervisors is, we don't want to see them adding back a whole bunch of, and that's what it's called, the add back process.
Add back process, exactly. I had a couple of thoughts on that, but I think also John had some thoughts on it. Did you want to chime in, John?
Yes, there are 2 groups that need to be assessed. One is the mayor, because the mayor is going to make formal recommendations. He is the one who is on the spot. Number two is the Board of Supervisors. And the question becomes whether the mayor and the Board of Supervisors will, in advance, agree upon the budget proposal. And I want to be very clear that the buck stops with Daniel Lurie. And in the end, the Board of Supervisors is more or less committed to follow the mayor's lead. It takes them off the hook and puts the mayor directly on the hook. The second point is about the nonprofits. The question of nonprofits is a serious question, because if the mayor's plan, as he has articulated it, is put into effect, he plans to supplement whatever the city budget is going to be with contributions from nonprofits. I want to add the word of caution about the potential for corruption. I've never known anybody who gave something without expecting something in return. And it raises a whole ethical question as we approach the question of the budget.
Yeah, that's a good point, simply because we've had years of fighting over what are generally called behested payments, which are essentially an elected official will go up to a constituent that has an issue, and let's say a constituent wants to develop a building someplace. The elected official will go up to them and say, things would go smoother if you had a reputation of contributing to the community, such as, say, contributing to help fund this particular program that is being run by a nonprofit that I support. And that's been happening for years in City Hall. And it was Aaron Peskin, ironically, who sort of led the fight against this, along with Larry Bush. And they had this sort of imperfect solution of a regulation regime for behested payments, but it's got exceptions to it. And Daniel Lurie, coming from the, shall we say, what is the best phrase to use? The social entrepreneurship community. That's the buzzword you got to use. Social entrepreneurship he believes in this kind of ultimate philanthropy and largesse, and so naturally it's coming back in to help bail out a lot of the pain points in the budget. But there's still going to be a lot of pain points afterwards. But the whole the whole basic issue that we have of the whole structure of this issue, where nonprofits become both the lobbyists for causes, and then they also execute city policy through contracts. I mean, it's the wolf in the hen house over and over and over again.
I agree with you 100%, which is why I'm raising the issue. When the mayor announces his budget proposal, the Board of Supervisors has to approve it. But part of what he's counting on are these supplemental voluntary contributions. And again, I think what you said is absolutely on target, but the budget will be the indicator of where we go in terms of what we fund in this city.
Yeah. I wonder what effect that's going to have on the ad-back process, because of what I thought was always the biggest scandal in the budget process is the ad-back process, which
Which
every
supervisor has an ad-back notion, because their job, because of the way the districts are structured, the way we do the elections, is to make sure their districts get a piece of that pie. So I think that's a very important point.
Right. The thing is, it's even more than that, because if you walk in to the second floor of City Hall on a day such as the days that have been happening this last week and this next week, one day you'll come in and you'll smell the smell of catered food, and you'll walk over to one of these rented one of the rooms inside City Hall, and you'll see it's been rented by a bunch of people from different nonprofits, and they've got all the trays of food out there for their operatives to go back and forth between the supervisors' offices, and to call up the different people to say, your constituents in your district want this, you have to vote for it, you have to add it back in.
Lord.
And if you go to the budget chair's office, you're going to see every day updated a spreadsheet of all of the different ad backs that have been requested and whether or not they're going to be able to get added back in. And in between of all that are negotiations that go into the middle of the night. so it's like the mayor will come to them with an approved budget, and then they, slice what they can from what the mayor wants and put it through this ad back matrix and put it back in for what they want. And this level of tolerance and this revolving door culture that we have, it is the ultimate expression of that has been the Prop Cs.
Yes.
The baby C and the big C essentially allowed public, nonprofits and their elected allies to come together behind closed doors and say, if I'm an elected official, if I get together with my colleagues and put this on the ballot, it's going to take 60% of voters to approve it. But if you put it on the ballot and say it's coming from the citizens, it's only going to take 50% plus one to put it on the ballot. So that way we can win. That way the skeptics don't have any way to put a check on this situation. So there you go.
Yeah.
You just nailed it, Mike, in terms of what this budget process is going to be. And again, I want to emphasize, in the end, this is Daniel Lurie's signature application of what he intends to prioritize. So in addition to everything that you just mentioned, we now have to factor in whether the board will go along with Daniel Lurie or whether they will say, wait a minute, that's our province. And that would be a very interesting development in terms of relations between the mayor and the board of supervisors.
Well, the other dimension that we haven't really crossed here is the labor community. And the labor is, they're heavily allied with nonprofits on one level, but they also have their own issues where they sometimes diverge from the rest of the progressive coalition. And, when you have a budget chair who is their primary supporter,
bought and paid for by them,
is the San Francisco Labor Council, you've got a real issue there. But anyway, I digressed everybody else now. This is all I know about the budget process in San Francisco. Nothing more to say about
it. So I can say one thing about the behested payment issue, as the person that broke the Nauru and Kelly and Dwayne Jones stories and the SFPC, community, benefits, Friends with Community Benefits expose that resulted in a lot of people either leaving the PC or being arrested. I can say that it depresses me to no end that Daniel Lurie has decided to bring it back and open everything up for corruption yet again. And it doesn't make a difference whether it's someone at the PUC like Dwayne Jones would go in between, Harlan Kelly and the nonprofits and the joint venture boards and say, we'd grade you a lot better if you took a look at this list of nonprofits we liked and picked a few. To me, that there's very little difference in that and him going out to his buddies and saying, look, if you'll put in some money here, you'll have a much better city. Because I've yet to know anybody who puts in a lot of money to solve a problem that there's really no benefit for them personally, not to then come back and say, Danny, I'm having a little problem with the, building code on this mansion I'm trying to build in Pacific Heights, and I could sure use, a little help on that. It happens all the time, and I just think it sets a really dangerous precedent. It's a very slippery slope, and, when in the campaign he constantly pointed that everybody that was running against him had ethics violations. Well, he's going to have them by the time he runs for re-election, because it's just a slippery slope when you start and trying to bring in the public, in the private donations. It's just it's just, to me, it's really not that much different than what happened at the PUC.
And that's a huge can of worms that has to be, which has been overflowing over the last couple of years, the public benefit funds.
And can he, the thing is like, I will definitely not, I just can't, if he's going to be tough, like he says he's going to be tough, these nonprofits have some money taken away. I'm just going to say it. They've gotten really happy and lazy feeding off the taxpayers' teat, and they have had very little scrutiny. Not a single one of these nonprofits has ever had a proper audit. I've been saying for years, when people used to say I was a meanie, I would say, let's audit these nonprofits. Let's cancel the contracts, start over, audit them, and then, once they're audited, put them on a course that says these are the milestones you must meet to keep this contract. And if you don't meet these milestones, then you'll have to go.
I could not agree more with that, Susan. And it is incredibly frustrating that, a couple of years ago, San Francisco taxpayers paid $125 million to nonprofits that don't exist.
Yeah.
Or were had not been re-upped or had been disbanded. It's insane. It's insane that could even happen. And where did all that money go?
Into their pockets.
Yeah, into someone's pockets, that's for sure. And of course, on a $16 billion budget, I've been told before, well, that's not really a big deal. It is a big deal. That is money that is being stolen from us. Hardworking people are funding waste, fraud, corruption. I don't know how deep the fraud and corruption goes. I suspect that the bigger issue with the San Francisco budget is waste. And in the grant, world, we're spending $1.7 billion on funding grants to nonprofits from our tax dollars. It's 10% of our budget is going to nonprofits, and the public isn't really clear on what they're getting for it.
Look at the streets. That's what I say. Look at the streets. What are you getting for the $1 billion you give to nonprofits, in the homeless industrial complex? And tell me, for example, Prop C, Jennifer Friedenbach, I'm looking at you. What have you done? You have funded over $1 billion, I believe, that they over time will, have gotten. They've spent all of the money so far, mostly on Housing First, which we know is Housing First, Morgue Second. And they don't do anything that has to do with sobriety. They don't believe in it, no recovery. They funded 700 plus net units. That's it. And they don't, if you look at their website, it's not clear where they are or how they did it. They have not built a single thing as far as housing goes. And yet they're angry that Daniel Lurie wants to take $100 million and put it toward, some sober housing and into, developments that already exist. Well, they sit there and they scream and they talk, and Kristen Evans, blah, blah, blah. Both, Kristen and our friend Jennifer are trust fund babies. They both come from very, very wealthy families. Neither one of them will ever have to worry about this. But the fact is, they're saying, how dare the mayor think he can take a third, which would be $100 million from this year's budget. I hate to break this to them, but a lot of the tech businesses that have left because of Prop C. So as their money dwindles, they brought that on themselves. And you know what? I know Mark Benioff, but shame on him, because he's the one that pushed this. Had he not gotten involved, I don't think it would have passed. I, at the time, was the only newspaper at the Marina Times. I was the only newspaper to do a no endorsement on Prop C. Heather Knight was giddy as she could be, Spinderella, just so excited about it. And, doing interviews with Mark. Oh, this is so fabulous. And she adores Jennifer Friedenbach. And I have still till this day, messages with her where she says, oh, it's going to be great. Well, look how that worked out. Taxpayers got screwed, and now they're leaving. They don't want, Elon Musk even called Benioff out, and Benioff said, we do need more transparency. Well, where is it?
I believe Benioff, if I recall correctly, I believe he has actually even said on X that he regrets Prop C, that he if he had it to do over with what he knows now, he would not have done it. I would love it if he would fund the rescission campaign, because I think that is a campaign that would pass in San Francisco now.
Mm-hmm.
Now that people have seen how this was structured, and it wasn't just that that Jennifer Friedenbach and Kristen Evans were leading this, and they were designing something that would promote their view of the world, which is not the common view. It's just that they're the loudest voices. I think, no one understood the impact of how this was structured and the buckets that were created. And I think most of us are now aware that they've created buckets where you can't put money into recovery housing. You can't put money into plans and programs that probably most San Franciscans would want, just because of the way the details of this structured the funding. And so we're stuck with this. And, I remember under London Breed, ConnectedSF members got involved in asking the board to vote to reallocate some of the money from those buckets, because one bucket was overflowing, and then shelter housing, there was no money for it. So it's really unfortunate that Prop C passed. It's really unfortunate that we're living with the ramifications, and it would be awesome if Mark Benioff wanted to actually proceed with some sort of campaign to rescind that.
Unfortunately, though, he goes back and forth, because at one point he texted me and said that he was not happy that I was going after Jennifer Friedenbach. And I mean, and he knows I've been going after her for decades, long before a lot of people even realized how evil she truly is. And I do believe she's evil. Because just look at the streets and the misery. I mean, the irony too here is that she gets taxpayer money, but then also turns around and sues the city to keep people in tents. So explain that to me. You try to get taxpayer money so that you can supposedly build permanent housing, which is an oxymoron. It's never going to happen. And then at the same time, you sue the city with money that you've probably, some of which has come because of Prop C. I mean, remember that the Prop C Commission has voted to give the $250,000 to the Coalition on Homelessness, which is Jennifer Friedenbach, to do her needs assessment. Are you telling me there was not another organization that was not the full-time lobbyist for Prop C and now running the money that couldn't have gotten a needs assessment done? I mean, the whole thing just smells to high heaven, and I'd respect Daniel Lurie. I'd take him to the freaking French Laundry if he would, actually just say, I want this thing taken away. Let's get it on the ballot and get rid of it. We don't need it. Take the money.
To be fair, he has been trying much in the same incremental way that London Breed tried to make some other use of the Prop C funds, specifically for trying to put it in for sober housing and things like that, and increasing.
And remind me what happened when London Breed tried to do that.
I don't think I need to remind you, do I?
Didn't the board pretty much say no?
Yeah, pretty much. But but what Lurie was trying to do now, hopefully with a little bit more momentum, is get that money pivoted back into I believe sober housing, into sober shelters. But I think John wanted to say a couple more things.
I just want to point out that the Daniel Lurie was elected mayor in part because of his expertise, as he claimed it, in nonprofits. That we should be looking to Daniel Lurie to see what his positions are in terms of structuring this budget. And you can talk about all the other, and I'm going to use the term peripheral, all the other peripheral characters, but it boils down to what Daniel Lurie recommends and what the Board of Supervisors approves. All the others are simply actors on the stage, but the sound and the fury will come from the mayor and the Board of Supervisors. And until he declares himself in terms of what he wants to do, and unless there is an agreement in advance between the mayor and the board, this is going to be a very messy process.
Yeah, I agree.
It always is. It always is going to be a very messy process.
And also, just to say one more thing about the nonprofit situation is, the whole, when Daniel Lurie says that he believes that they should be audited, or he did during the campaign at least, I just got they just put up the Tipping Point, his nonprofit just put up their 2023/24 990. And I found it very interesting. They're still funding HomeRise SF. HomeRise SF has been, they're being investigated. They have splurged on trips and credit cards. They were called out by the city attorney. The controller did an audit of them, finding that the money was going into the pockets of the people running it. They're one of the top housing first, morgue second organizations as far as deaths within their buildings. So it's concerning to me that Tipping Point is still funding that organization, and it makes you sort of worry. At least it makes me worry. Just how deep into this can he really get with a city full of nonprofits when he's still funding one of the absolute worst through Tipping Point?
Mm.
And that, my friends, is exactly my point. It took us a while to get to it, but that's exactly the point I'm making. And that's why it is Daniel Lurie who is on the spot. And for the first time, we may see him really declaring what his priorities are. Remember that his strength has been obfuscation, of being able to have constituents say, well, he's for this, but he says he's for that. And the confusion will end when the mayor's office submits the budget and when the members of the Board of Supervisors pile on, which they most assuredly will.
Yes, they will. Connie Chan especially, right, Mike? She'll be throwing things.
Yeah, she's going to be the white knight on the horse here in the struggle against Daniel Lurie and his, according to the progressives, struggle to turn everything into keeping the streets clean.
Well, yeah.
The whole question of fentanyl and all of these questions, of course, what Daniel Lurie is appealing is for other givers to step forward and essentially give him and the city, but I'm using them interchangeably, the wherewithal to really address these problems. On the success or failure of what Daniel Lurie submits will be the success or failure of his administration. And let me just point out one more thing, if I may. We have not talked about what is happening here in the city as a sanctuary city and the question of the relationship of ICE to what's happening. Remember that we get considerable funding from the feds and the state. And if Donald Trump and his administration proceed to react as negatively as it appears they will, then Daniel Lurie will be fighting with another hand tied behind his back. Because how do you make up the shortfall if funds are cut off? And that to me is the other major ingredient in our discussion about the city budget.
Yeah, John, that is that I think that's a key factor here in why I want to see our budget reduced substantially this time around, and it's not being reduced. I appreciate the reductions that have been made. They don't go far enough, and what I am very hopeful about is that Mayor Lurie plans to start the process in July 1 for next year, so that it's not sort of back on the heels, being sworn in January and having to get up to speed on everything between January and the end of May, and promote putting forth a budget without much help from the departments. Let's remember that. He issued the request or the instruction that the departments cut their budgets by 15%, and what he got back was
Nowhere near that for a lot of them.
Nowhere near that. And it wasn't only, I think it was only about 10 departments actually tried to do what he asked. And
Marie, didn't you point out that some were asking for more?
Yes. Many increased their budgets. And right, I know.
Oh god.
And the head of the budget office there, Sonia or Sophia, sent out another instruction, at Daniel's request, saying, this is not acceptable. You need to, we're not kidding. We need you to reduce these budgets. And it still didn't happen. And the mayor and his team, started digging in and are started cutting, but they're not there. And so my hope is, my personal hope is, and expectation is, that this coming year will right size our budget, because as I wrote in the Voice of San Francisco in the articles that I put out for you, we have to acknowledge the reality of the situation. The reality is our population is down quite significantly. It's down about 5% since 2019. And the fact of the matter is, that is a huge drop in population. It doesn't sound like much if you're talking, just in sort of in general terms in the world, but in population is such a big deal. It's a big deal for 5% of our population to move out of the city, to pick up their lives and move out. And it is going to take us a long time to get back to that. And in fact, the California Department of Finance is actually, their latest predictions are that we are never going to get back to 2019 levels, which is quite gut-wrenching if you think about it. And so that is one factor in this new reality. And another major factor is what John just mentioned, that we will very likely have federal funding cut at some point in the near future. And there was a lot of federal funding that London Breed was trying to get from the pandemic that she wasn't able to get under Biden. And so the idea that we would be able to get that, under a new administration.
Technically, this is emergency payments that were promised to us and now are likely to be clawed back, right?
Mm-hmm.
Clawed back.
Well, but they were not given. They were not doled out previously, and the idea that they would be doled out now is even more unlikely.
Right.
So that is a massive that's a massive risk. It's a very likely risk, and we need to address our new reality. We need to deal with our new reality, and it hasn't happened for the last 5 years. Spending in San Francisco surged during the pandemic, and even if we could just level out that surge, we'd be in a much better place. I mean, San Francisco has overspent for quite a long time. This is not a new phenomenon, but it really spiked during the pandemic. And so, even if we could get back to sort of our normal overspending, we'd be better off than we are right now.
John, did you have something you wanted to say?
I just wanted to add, that's why Daniel Lurie is on the spot. It is his budget, which he is proposing, which he needs to be able to sell to the people, with all of the frankness and candor which we have just heard in our conversation. We cannot afford to maintain the levels that we are spending. And let me point out one other point. The San Francisco Unified School District is going to have a massive shortfall. Who do you think they're going to come to? Because they're losing population. We were just talking about population. Who do you think they're going to come to make up the difference? And it's, of course, San Francisco City Hall. So if I were in the shoes of our mayor, I would be proposing the most conservative budget imaginable. I would be recommending the cuts that are absolutely necessary. And if he does that, at least he's in the position of defending why he's doing it and risks fewer antagonisms in the months ahead. Otherwise, the people who voted for him, who believe that in the end he produced the money that would pay for everything, are going to suffer severe disappointments.
Yeah, I mean, and if we just want to be, realistic and look at other cities and counties, the city and county of Philadelphia has a population of $1.6 million. A population of 1.6 million people and a budget of $6 billion. And they have 25,000 employees. That's it for a city and county of 1.6 million. The budget is 6.4 billion. That's it. And, city and county of Santa Clara, again, people always say, well, San Francisco, it's a city and a county. Okay, fine. But let's do per capita. San Francisco, $15 billion, 800,000 residents. That's $18,564 per capita. San Jose, a $3 billion budget, 969,000 residents. That's $3,000 per capita. That is outrageous. And Santa Clara County, $12.5 billion, $12.5 billion, 1.87 million residents. That's $6,600 per capita. So to recap, San Francisco, 18,500 per capita. And San Jose, 9,700 per capita. So you can talk till the cows come home about city, county, blah, blah, blah. But, it's irrelevant when you look per capita at the fact that San Francisco is spending double what San Jose is per capita. And that Santa Clara County, has almost 1.87 million residents, and it's only $6,000 per capita. San Francisco needs to get real with its big bad self and its big bad budget.
Yes. And when you're comparing Santa Clara County and San Francisco, you also include the fact that they actually have another one of the excuses people talk about is say, well, you're not talking about the enterprise departments. Santa Clara has very similar. They have their own airport, they have their own large public transportation system. Again, they're really comparable to San Francisco, regardless of
and Philadelphia. And they're not alone. Denver, same thing. City and county, all of these. You can go. Maybe what we'll do, Marie, is we'll put up some kind of on The Voice just for budget season, a comparison of cities and counties and what their and their comparison of their population versus per capita spending, just so people can see how outrageous San Francisco is, and the bullying nonprofits. And you can blame Mayor Breed for a lot of things, but she tried really hard to claw away some of that money and to reduce the budget. And every single time it came back in the clawbacks, the ad call them clawbacks, but the ad backs. Every single time she tried and failed to get, money out of the grips of the Board of Supervisors and their pet projects. And you know what? Aaron Peskin, he can talk too, but he was the same. He wants his little pet projects to go forward. Preston was probably the worst. But, now you still got Connie Chan, and all of them standing on the steps, blabbing away about being a sanctuary city. That's all fine and dandy until the Trump administration starts taking away your money.
Right.
And not to mention the fact that there are other public services that are often turned into the bad guys in result of these struggles, because it's often the pet projects and the pork barrel constituencies against public safety. Now, that doesn't mean that there isn't times where public safety departments do ask for their own levels of largesse, but invariably, it seems like a lot of the rhetoric that comes from the service nonprofits and the public figures that support them is that we're giving way too much money to police and we shouldn't be policing this way. Why do this? Why try to retain police officers? When in fact we should be, building more suicide cubicles for homeless people.
Hey, Mike, what's the date certain that Daniel Lurie, remind us, when Daniel Lurie has to submit his proposed budget.
Okay. Well, there's actually a calendar that is on Connie Chan's webpage at the Board of Soups. Let me see if I can switch to that. But basically, we're sort of in the middle of the process right now.
And Connie is the chair of the budget. Yeah.
So let me see if I can get. Okay.
And she's already saying about, by the way, the other day in that ridiculous Joe Fitz Rodriguez article in the Standard, he's longtime chummy with Connie. That picture of her looking like the Terminator, and there she was. I'm not going to allow Daniel Lurie to take money away from the nonprofits. Okay, here we go.
Exactly.
So the date, because the real discussion, the real hard discussion about what is going to be cut and what the priorities of the mayor are will be determined by that date certain budget submittal. So do we have that? Do we know what it is?
Well, the mayor has already sort of submitted his budget, I believe. Well, the budget instructions were last December. Let me see here.
No, he
the ordinances were submitted by May 30th. And the hearings have been starting this past week and this coming weeks.
Yeah, we're already at the Board of Supervisors now.
Exactly, and the budget and the budget committee's proposed spending plan, which is sort of a reaction to that salary ordinance, is probably going to come out towards the end of this week. But you've got the current budget ordinance submitted by the mayor already. They're going to be also voting. They're voting on the interim budget, I believe, also this week, which is sort of the final approval of the interim proposed budget. That should be by next week. So this week and next week, because remember the board votes twice for things.
Right.
But the final interim proposed budget from the Board of Supervisors is also coming June 24th. And again, that's the interim budget. But the remaining budget areas, those are coming out between now and I believe, when is public comment day? Public comment day is June 23rd, which is one of the reasons that we wanted to have this discussion today,
right?
To give people time to plan for it. But yeah, I mean, the mayor's budget ordinance, which includes all of the proposed budgets from the city departments, has already been submitted. But there was initial review of it this past week. There's going to be another review of it this coming week with the reports from the budget and legislative analyst, and that's what the Board of Supervisors is going to base their pushback on.
And that's going to be what we have to highlight in the Voice of San Francisco, with as much input and discussion as we can have. And we should do this again in a far more detailed way, because there will be glaring examples of things which we agree with and that we disagree with. And one last point, because I know we're about to hit the end of the show, is the question of how much money nonprofits are being solicited for and how the mayor is taking that into account in his budget proposal.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
I have a real issue, honestly, with private donations funding a government.
We should.
Yeah, it's unheard of. I always point to Mayor Matt Mahan in San Jose, who, in my opinion, is the best mayor in the Bay Area, and we follow each other on X, and I spend, I grew up part in San Francisco, part in Silicon Valley, and still spend time both places, although I lived in San Francisco full-time for a very long time, but a lot of my family is here. And truth be told, the problems in Silicon Valley just don't compare. There's just not there. You don't see open drug dealing. You don't see open drug use. You don't see tents in front of people's houses. The biggest problem is probably downtown, a little bit in East San Jose. But comparatively, when there's a large encampment popping up in Silicon Valley, even in, I'm not just talking about Los Gatos or, some of the more shiny areas, it doesn't stay there. And they get services. There are tiny home communities that are working. He works closely with someone that, Mike interviewed for The Voice, Elizabeth Funk of Dignity Moves. I'm going to be talking to her and hopefully doing an article and going to one of these communities in San Jose with her and Mayor Mahan. But he doesn't fool around. I mean, it's a different approach that he takes. And again, he did come from the private sector. He came from tech and business. He beat out a long-time political operative to become mayor. Last time ran unopposed, which tells you something, and got almost 90 some odd % of the vote, which is, again, pretty rare. And I feel like we need that kind of toughness coming from Daniel Lurie, because otherwise these nonprofits and their, little codependent politicians are going to just roll over him.
If I can make sort of a last comment, and it sort of follows on what you're saying, Susan. What I think people need to recognize and realize and act on is that the people, all of us who are, just living our lives, working, raising our families, volunteering, doing what we need to do, we're not really represented at the table. And that's, obviously ConnectedSF provides an interface for democracy with helping people give public comment and helping people send emails and things like that. And people need to recognize this is really, really important. It's important to speak up, because the nonprofits, the people who have a stake in taking money from the government, taking your taxpayer dollars, are very, very well organized. And, even internally, you see the unions showing up at the Board of Supervisors meetings demanding their raises. I watched it in the 2020. The first time I watched the budget process was in 2020, because I was taking that year to figure things out. And I called in. I could not believe that they decided, it just was unfathomable to me. They decided to raid our reserves in order to give a 3% raise to government employees during the pandemic. This is 2020, June of 2020. People were losing their jobs. The taxpayers who were funding our government were losing their jobs, losing their businesses. And our government, instead of turning around and saying, you know what, we need to work harder to make this right here in San Francisco, they gave themselves a raise. And instead of focusing on the people, they gave themselves a raise. And so the citizens need to recognize they have to speak up, because it is too easy for organized, entrenched interests to demand what they want and put pressure on our government to give it to them. They need to speak up. They need to speak up for themselves, and this is a great opportunity to do it.
But Maria, it also happens, when in front of City Hall, when all the union people and the nonprofits gathered around, and the Board of Supervisors, by the way, were all there, for the guy going on the hunger strike. I remember someone said, "Oh, the people are all here at City Hall to say no way to the mayor to take away money from the nonprofits." And something that really stood out to me was one of the comments simply said, "No, the people aren't there because we have to work."
Yep. Mm-hmm. I saw that comment. Yep. 100%.
And I'm not saying there aren't unions that do, I personally know people, in the unions, like for the DPW and, La Luna, for example. They gave me an award for investigative reporting when, quite frankly, the Northern California Journalism Association, or whatever it's called, with Joe Fitz as their vice president, that year that I broke all the corruption stories and all these people went to jail, they gave their Journalist of the Year award to Joe Eskenazi. So, at least I feel like in this case, this was a union that, blue collar workers really tired of seeing their bosses be corrupt. And some of my best sources were in the union, as well as employees of the PUC and the DPW. These are the guys that, literally drive the trucks, pick up the trash, all of that. So I do have respect for what these unions fight for. There are certain unions that I absolutely do not, and they tend to be the ones that are the most vocal about not defunding them, not defunding the nonprofits. And I just think they have a rude awakening coming, because they can stand there and.
You mean all SEIU chapters in operating in San Francisco? But
how many are there? I know there's the big one, but is.
Exactly. That's the whole thing. I mean, it's primarily the service. It's the unions that represent the service employees and the teachers.
Yeah.
If we really want to point fingers.
Yeah, and the workers themselves are wonderful, and no aspersions on them. And it's not even whether or not the unions are good or bad. It is just pointing out to the public that other people who want a cut of taxpayer dollars are well organized, and as the people who are living here and want better services for, we spend so much money and our services aren't great right now. We want better services and we want to spend less. And there's you have to recognize that you have to participate in order to speak up against, sort of the runaway nature of our city budget.
Right. And
the next couple of weeks are going to be critical.
Indeed.
And that's why we have to be on it in terms of the Voice of San Francisco and what we're doing, and to give people the opportunity to hear the varied opinions and to make our voices heard.
Yep.
Absolutely.
100%.
Well, we're all going to have to take a trip down to City Hall and see if there's any catering at the second floor on the second floor, and try and get a hold of that spreadsheet before Connie Chan or one of her aides decides to snatch it off the wall and hide it. Stand in her office and request it, like I've done, and like I've seen other reporters do.
Oh, really?
Mike Maggie's kitchen will be open.
I'm a bachelor. I do not have a kitchen. I use my kitchen as my office.
We'll just have to shop around. But I'm glad we had this discussion, and I hope people are listening.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you so much for having me, and happy Father's Day, everyone.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for being a part of this, and for your excellent articles as well.
My pleasure. Thank you all so much.
Okay.
Can we end by urging people to subscribe?
Yes.
And contribute to the Voice of San Francisco?
Absolutely. One of the things that I think we have specific goals that we're doing for subscriptions. Maybe Susan could talk to us about that.
Yeah, we are on a drive to get 2,000 subscribers at $10 a month, which would be sustaining for us and, mean the world to us. It's 100% tax deductible. We are a California 501c3 nonprofit. Even if you do, subscription and share it with everybody, that's fine. Just if you could contribute $10 a month, I do that with numerous, animal charities. I give them $10 a month, and, it may not seem like a lot, but it all adds up and helps us continue to do this reporting.
Where to go in order to do either a contribution or a subscription? Or both.
You can go to thevoicesf.org, which is our primary page, and if you scroll down to about the middle way, around the middle of this page, you'll see this orange stripe, which allows you to subscribe to our newsletters and gives you the different donation levels. And that subscription does come with a newsletter, a special newsletter of its own that comes out Thursday afternoons. Which include the highlights of our stories from the previous week, as well as some original work done by yours truly. Usually we have some semi-breaking news in there, or more conversational, gossipy, conversational type news put into that little piece of 500 to 700 words that accompanies the highlights in the news.
And he's downplaying the fact, though, that Mike Iggy has been a fixture at City Hall, so he definitely has a lot of sources, and he gets some really good info that ends up in those newsletters.
All right. Well, let's do it. Happy Father's Day, and everybody subscribe or contribute. And thank you for doing this today.
Thank you.
And thank you. And thank you all for coming to listen, and have a great Sunday.
Bye.
Wonderful. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.